Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this episode, we are going to continue work on the breather tank in the back of the Supra here. So, in the last episode that we were working on this car to a significant degree, I went ahead and I built this portion of the breather box. And today we are going to work on finishing this. So you can see that we have the general form of the box completed currently. And now it is time to go in and to craft the rest of it. So I need to place the bungs, need to finish the top of it, finish the baffling on the inside, and so on and so forth. And we're going to knock that out today. So the first thing that needs to be done with this is I need to determine the locations of the two inlet ports that will sit on this panel right here. And there'll be two number 16 ORB bungs that obviously have to sit above this portion of the parachute gusseting right here. And I'll space them probably fairly equidistantly along the run of this panel for nice aesthetics and what have you. And then on the inside, we're going to do some pretty elaborate baffling that probably is unnecessary, but I have an idea in my head that I want to implement into the design of this tank, and we are going to do just that. So let me go ahead. I will pull this box out, or I can bring the bungs over first rather, and determine where everything needs to be located at, and we can proceed from there. Alright, we have our number 16 ORB bungs tacked into the tank and the beginning of the baffle system ready to be welded in. So what we are doing in terms of a baffle system is taking these two pieces of 2-inch tubing, and let me see, I think this is the one for this side, welding these tubes in to direct any fluid flow that would come through these fittings down at this back corner. And from there, I will take maybe one of these sheets right here, cut a square out of them, and have that sit in there something like so. And what this will do is give direction to any breather fluids, bypass fluids, any exploded engine oil that comes at a high velocity through these two bungs. It will direct it into one location in the tank, and the baffle that sits above will prevent any spillage or any sloshing, any fluid from making its way up and through the exhaust stack unless the tank completely fills up. So this is just my idea of how to make this a little bit more effective of a baffle system and effective of a tank. And the nice thing is none of these bits will impede the drain that will be located ideally on this bottom corner right here. So everything on the bottom of the tank will still be free flowing, meaning that I can get fluid or any blow by down to that drain bung, but the baffles above will prevent any fluid explosions out of the exhaust stack and out of the hatch on the car. So hopefully that makes some sense. If not, it will once I get these pieces welded or tacked and welded into place. So let's go ahead, get the welder fired back up, and get this portion of this tank knocked out. And we now have the baffling in place. So I ended up taking those couple of pieces of miscellaneous, just extra sheet metal that I had on the table here, and rather than just throw them over in the excess metal bin that I have, I gave them a purpose here as the baffles. So these tubes, they direct down towards this corner here, and this splash baffle here will prevent, or hopefully prevent, any excess blow-by or a large volume of it that would happen from an engine failure from making its way easily up the exhaust tube or the exhaust stack and dousing everything behind the car in waste oil. So I think it should work out all right. It's somewhat similar to the way that I typically build my baffle systems for catch cans, and being that this is just a large catch can, I think it should work out all right. So now that we are at this point with this tank, I guess the time has come where I can put the top on and weld the whole thing solid. So I was debating the exact order of operations that I wanted to apply to this, in terms of, do I want to put the exhaust stack on the top piece of sheet metal now and then try to tailor the hole for that, or do I want to do the hole first and then do the exhaust stack, or so on and so forth? And I think that I have came to the conclusion that I need to weld the tank together first, and from there I can cut the hole in the carbon hatch, which really not looking forward to doing that, but it's a necessity to make this tank work the way that it needs to. So make the tank first, mount the tank, then pop the hole in the hatch, figure out the exhaust stack for it, and we will be essentially done with the tank at that point. So let me go ahead. I will prep the surface of the lid of the tank, get it tacked on, and then we can get started with welding this thing and making it all one piece. There we have the tank welded up, or at least in its current iteration. And the welds came out all right. They're certainly not the best outside corners that I've ever done, but due to the length of a lot of these runs, I ended up having to do the welds in multiple sections, which I'm not a big fan of doing that on outside corners, as you can see somewhere like right here, you get the AC etching, and then it's hard to blend it in seamlessly. But that's just me being nitpicky. The tank will work perfectly fine the way that it is. And the most important part is that it serves its purpose correctly, which it certainly will. So now I'm going to go ahead, chase the threads in the 16 ORB bungs. And at that point, we are able to start building the feet and determining where we are, or not where, but how we are going to mount this. And like I've said in the last few videos, always chase your threads, because if you see, or if you guys can see, look at all of that aluminum that the tap took out of those bungs. And that would have been what was trying to hold the fitting up, or the hose end, or I guess fitting in this case. But that would be what was trying to hold it up and disallowing that fitting from threading into the bung. So no matter how well you tack, no matter how much due diligence you employ, there's just no way to avoid warping in some of these instances, and this is certainly one of them. So now that we have our threads chased, or I guess at this point I could almost say fresh threads put in, those bungs are good to go. I can clean them out, clean the threads out, so there's no remnants of metal left that will cause any undue issues. And now we are ready to put this tank in the rear of the car and start determining our mounting solution. All right, we now have our 4 little mounting legs all bent and trued up to 90 degrees, verified by our nice little square here. So what I'm going to do next, and if you remember when we built the fuel cell for the car, I built mounts that were very similar to these ones that I'm building now. And while this 90-degree broke piece of aluminum likely would be all right, I am going to put a gusset on either side, just a normal little right triangle that fills in essentially this void between my thumb and my middle finger there. And I like to get a little bit fancier with it as well, and we'll go ahead and drill a center hole in each one of those. Just a little beauty hole, doesn't serve any structural benefit or anything like that, just to make it look a little bit nicer. So here I'm going to mark out. That should be pretty much the perfect size for all of these. Yeah, pretty close to it. And I'll go ahead, now that I have my initial reference point, I can set the saw stop, or the feed stop rather, cut out 4 of these pieces, which we will then go ahead and I'll make a diagonal cut, something like that on them, to create 2 triangles out of each piece. 2 triangles will fill up the 2 sides of each one of these. I'll get my holes drilled, and I will go ahead and get everything welded here. So these will be done, and then we can go over to the car and determine our locations, mark that out, so on and so forth. So I'll go ahead and knock these out off camera. As you guys, if you've stuck around on this channel, you've seen me do enough drafting throughout the course of all of the videos, and I don't need to show it again. So I'll go ahead and get these drafted, get them cut, and we will go from there. All right, so we are not mounted up, but I have the mounts made and they are all tacked to the tank. So built 4 little, they're just 90-degree bent pieces of aluminum with gussets on them, and then beauty holes, of course. Because this is such a large tank, I don't want it drumming around at all, and 4 mounts seemed the best way to alleviate the possibility of that. So now that I've verified this seems good where it's at, I can pull it out and weld those mounts up. However, before I do that, or actually, no. We weld these up first in case they move or anything like that. And once they are welded, then I can come in and mark out where the holes need to be drilled for the rib nuts, get those drilled, get some paint on them, put the rib nuts in place, and then this thing will be able to be bolted into the car. All right, we are mounted in place now, and it is time to cut the hole in the carbon hatch. You said that's the part that I've been not looking forward to this whole time, but it's a necessity. So I guess let me close the hatch. I can mark out roughly where the hole needs to be, figure out the size of hole saw that I need, and then ruin a nice carbon hatch. But it is what it is, and I guess go ahead and get to it. After another day's worth of work, we have the breather tank completed for the most part. It isn't 100% done yet, as I don't have some of the materials, and frankly, I just ran out of time. Right now, I'm building on Christmas, and I've spent the entire day out at the shop. It's time to get out of here and to go do other things for the remainder of the day. But before we do that, let's take a look at what we accomplished. So, looking at it from the outside, we have our little exhaust stack deal here. Again, I'm not thrilled that the hatch now has an additional hole in it, but it was a necessity to bring this idea and to bring this project to life. So I still have the factory hatch for the car that does not have a 2 1/4 inch or 2 1/8 inch, whichever size hole saw I used, hole in it. But this carbon hatch is more or less sacrificial, whereas the factory hatch is not. So we have our exhaust stack here. Went ahead and I also put a BPA logo on it, again, because why not? And let me pop the hatch real quick. You can take a look at how everything fits inside of here. So this is what we are left with, or what we ended up with rather. Have 1, 2, 3, and I need to do a little bit of work on this tab down here to get the 4th fastener in place. This is a prime example of, even when you mark things out, you drill them in their proper locations. Sometimes things move, sometimes things shift, and sometimes plans don't work out the way that you planned them to. So, not a big deal. I just have to oval this hole a little bit. I just didn't feel like doing it today. So, we have our 2 inlets on the sides here, and I may end up as well putting a cap on the top of this, so that way I can loosen the cap off and actually be able to get my eyes on what's going on inside of this tank, as opposed to just emptying it whenever I feel like it. And in regards to emptying it, I did not put the bung on for the drain. That is a number 10 ORB that will be located down on this bottom driver's side most corner there. But that's what we have for right now. And shutting the hatch, it clears perfectly fine. Sits out probably about 1/4 of an inch from the surface of the hatch right here, which is exactly what I wanted. I obviously didn't want it to sit inside the cabin should the engine ever come apart and I actually need to use this tank. If it was sitting down lower, or if I just put a filter or something on it, all that's going to do is have an oily explosion on the inside of the car, and that's more of a mess than it needs to be. But we are wrapped up with the tank for the most part, and next we'll need to plumb it. So I have some of the materials for that. Some of the materials are also on the way. And oh, I guess the last materials that are outstanding for this, I bought some perforated sheet to put a little cap on this that has a bunch of holes like a normal perforated sheet does. And my theory with that is it reduces the cross-sectional area of this 2-inch tube. But if I have that perforated sheet on the top, any falling debris, if the car sits outside, leaves, anything else like that could fall in and potentially clog the exhaust stack on this thing, that alleviates the possibility of that happening. So I have that sheet on the way. It just has not arrived yet, as it is holiday time and people are taking time off to spend with their families and what have you. But all of that aside, we'll need to plumb this thing next. 2 16 lines that'll go up to the front, and then I'll have to make some little Y adapters to go from 2 12s to 1 16, as well as 2 10s to 1 16. So that'll be a task for another day, as like I said in the beginning of this rambling, it's time for me to get out of here for the day. So with that in mind, thank you guys very much for tuning in. You guys make this channel what it is. I'm just the dummy here cutting and playing with metal. But I really appreciate you guys, and I hope that you all had a wonderful holiday and got to spend it with your family, your friends, your loved ones, as this will end up airing after Christmas. But with all that aside, that's going to be the end of this video. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.